Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It is Tuesday, June 28th, 2022. This is the Commissioners' special meeting live in City Hall, Commissioners' Room, second floor. Thank you for being here. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:05 a.m. We'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Shranowski.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners. We're able to formally make a quorum and formally conduct business today. The purpose of this special meeting is twofold. One is to conduct a public hearing in reference to the comprehensive development plan as stated in the agenda. And the other item of business today is an amended agenda item to discuss the Sandcastle Hotel construction project. With that, want to begin with the public hearing of the CDP, and I think the best way to introduce this would be to read the proposed draft ordinance. And as Glenn reads that, if you pay attention, it'll give a little history of it. Also, as he reads it, I'd like to make note that this version is June 2nd. So let's keep an eye open and see if there's any potential changes or amendments that might have to be made if we get to the point where we make a motion on this today. Glenn, I'll start off with you when you are ready.
Sure. So this is an ordinance of the mayor and commissioners of the city of Rehoboth Beach adopting the 2020 comprehensive plan update and requesting that the governor of Delaware certify the plan. Whereas Title 22, Section 702A of the Delaware Code provides in relevant part that a planning commission established by any incorporated municipality under this chapter shall prepare a comprehensive plan for the city or town or portions thereof as the commission deems appropriate. Whereas the comprehensive plan of the city of Rehoboth Beach was certified by the state of Delaware as of July 23, 2010. Whereas Title 22, Section 702E of the Delaware Code provides in relevant part that at least every 5 years, a municipality shall review its adopted comprehensive plan to determine if its provisions are still relevant given changing conditions in the municipality or in the surrounding areas. The adopted comprehensive plan shall be revised, updated, and amended as necessary and readopted at least every 10 years. Whereas Title 22, Section 702F of the Delaware Code provides in relevant part that the plan shall be subject to the state review and certification process set forth in Section 9103 of Title 29, whereas Title 29, Section 9103E of the Delaware Code provides in relevant part that the Office of State Planning Coordination shall submit a final comprehensive plan report and recommendation to the governor or designee for certification. Whereas the City of Rehoboth Beach, through its Planning Commission, reviewed the 2010 comprehensive plan and provided an update to the State of Delaware Office of State Planning Coordination on October 21, 2015. Whereas the City of Rehoboth Beach, through the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission and the Mayor and City Commissioners, has been actively engaged in preparing and finalizing the 10-year comprehensive plan update. Whereas the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission has held at least 12 duly noticed public meetings to consider the various drafts of the 2020 CDP. Whereas draft number 5 of the 2020 comprehensive plan was distributed to the State Preliminary Land Use Service Plus and neighboring jurisdictions, and on February 23, 2022, draft number 5 of the 2020 comprehensive plan was discussed at a Plus meeting, which was open to the public. Whereas, following the February 23, 2022 Plus meeting, the Planning Commission received written comments from various state agencies and other local government bodies regarding draft number 5 of the comprehensive plan, all as part of the Plus review process. Those comments required to be addressed in a subsequent draft of the 2020 comprehensive plan. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic and mapping issues significantly delayed the preparation of the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission's draft number 7 of the comprehensive plan update for consideration. Whereas the city has received an extension from the state through July 29, 2022 to adopt the 2020 comprehensive plan. Whereas the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission held a duly noticed public meeting on May 13, 2022 for the purpose of considering and voting to recommend for adoption by the Board of Commissioners draft number 6 of the 2020 comprehensive plan. Whereas during the May 13, 2022 meeting, the Planning Commission, by unanimous consent, agreed to make a few minor additional changes to Comprehensive Plan Draft Number 6 to be incorporated into Comprehensive Plan Draft Number 7. Whereas during the May 13, 2022 meeting, the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission voted 7-0 with 2 members not present, both, 1, to forward the comprehensive plan draft number 7 to the Board of Commissioners for consideration and review, and 2, to recommend the Board of Commissioners adopt comprehensive plan draft number 7 as the 2020 comprehensive development plan for the city of Rehoboth Beach. Whereas at a special meeting on May 17, 2022, the mayor and commissioners accepted the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission's draft number 7 of the comprehensive plan update for consideration. Whereas after first providing proper notice to the public, the mayor and commissioners conducted at least 6 public meetings to further consider the draft 2020 comprehensive plan update. Whereas, as a result of the public meetings, the mayor and commissioners made further edits to comprehensive plan draft number 7. Whereas after first providing proper notice to the public and publication within newspapers of general circulation within the city, the mayor and city commissioners conducted a public hearing on June 28, 2022 for the purpose of receiving additional public comment on the draft 2020 comprehensive plan update. Whereas after considering all written and public comments provided through the public hearing process, a final draft of the 2020 comprehensive plan update was prepared and is attached hereto as Exhibit A. Whereas the final draft 2020's comprehensive plan update has been reviewed and considered by the mayor and city commissioners of the city of Rehoboth Beach. Whereas the mayor and city commissioners find that the final draft 2020 comprehensive development plan amply meets the city's obligation under Title 22, Section 702A, to encourage the most appropriate uses of the physical and fiscal resources of the municipality and the coordination of municipal growth, development, and infrastructure investment actions with those of other municipalities, counties, and state through the process of municipal comprehensive planning. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the mayor and city commissioners of the city of Rehoboth Beach in session met this 28th day of June 2022 as follows. Section 1. The mayor and city commissioners of the city of Rehoboth Beach hereby adopt the 2020 comprehensive plan update attached hereto as Exhibit A. Section 2, the mayor and city commissioners of the city of Rehoboth Beach hereby request that the governor of Delaware or his designee certify the 2020 Rehoboth Beach comprehensive development plan update. Section 3, this ordinance shall be effective immediately upon the governor's certification of the 2020 Rehoboth Beach comprehensive development plan. And that's the ordinance, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Again, the intent of having Glenn read this is to give us a little background and history. This will be up for consideration later on after the public hearing that we conduct today. Would like to remind everybody that we are not forced to take a vote today. We do have a meeting scheduled July 5th, Tuesday at 9 a.m. On the docket, just in case we need to postpone this. And so there's no pressure there. I would like to remind everybody that this version is dated June 2nd. It was embedded in the agenda, so any references to it refer to version number 10. The versions number 7 draft referenced were the draft that the Planning Commission adopted and gave to us. Glenn, I would ask you, do we need to have any further specificity on line 90 or 95 specifying that the Exhibit A is indeed the same as version 10, and on line 95, so that's line 90, and on 95, that the final draft 2020 is the final draft version number 10. I don't know if we're gonna.
I don't think it hurts to include that, Mayor. I mean, the draft that we attached as Exhibit A will be draft number 10, but if you'd like to insert draft 10 just for clarity within the ordinance, I think that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, do we go to public hearing or take
Unless there's,
questions?
you might want to comment up here if there's something in draft number 10 that you've noticed that you'd like to discuss before going to the public, that's proper.
Open it to anybody? We want to see who's going to delay adoption of this.
Anybody.
Anybody? No, with that, again, this is a public hearing, so we want to hear from members of the public and receive their comments. Is there anybody, members of the public here that would like to speak? Yes, that looks reluctant. One little finger up there. Come on up, David. Is that microphone on there? I'd like you to identify yourself and identify your relationship to the city, if you would, please.
Ed Mellon, 105 Rodney Street. A couple questions. One question is, I'm confused as to why the zoning code or the zoning map has not been upgraded and submitted to the state. I think it's 4.2, someplace in that area, the end of chapter 4. The zoning map is shown, and it's the old zoning map, and it's obviously that there are corrections that need to be made to that map, and it seems to me there's been, the state, of course, it's questionable what the state does with the CDP. There's arguments that they very often put it on a shelf and don't do anything thereafter. But one of the things that the state does truly have interest in is a proper zoning map. So I'm just curious as to why, after all this time, we don't have a zoning map to submit with this. And then the only other comment that I would make is in reading the CDP and reading the sort of the comments about things that should be done, it just seems to me that there is a lot of things that are suggested should be done. The real question is how, with the reduced number of people in this city, how are we going to implement the CDP once it is approved? Because there's an awful lot of things that need to be done, and there doesn't seem to be a good mechanism for implementing all of those things. So one is a question, two questions.
Thank you. I'll be glad to go ahead and answer them. Glenn, I'm going to have you answer the first question. I'm going to start in reverse order, though, with the second one. You know, there is mention in in fact, there's a whole chapter on implementation. But that only hits the surface. I think really it falls in the commissioner's hands. And so we will be, in fact, per guidance of that chapter, we will be conducting additional meetings. And I think we have to have meetings up here among ourselves to look at different things and discuss what the process will be going forward, including such things as what are our priorities, what are our funding mechanisms, and how do we take 7 sets of priorities and condense them into one cohesive set of priorities. So there is a lot of homework still to do, David.
On the zoning map, I guess what I'd comment is you're exactly right, and the commissioners recognize that that it's time to update the zoning map. It has not been done in advance of the CDP, but there's an action item within the CDP to get that done, so they've recognized that they need to. There's actually a notation on the zoning map that's included within the CDP that says this zoning map does not depict any subdivisions or lot consolidations that have been approved since its adoption in 2010. So there's a recognition that there's been no updates to the zoning map since 2010. But again, there is an action item that the commissioners, so it's a force of law action item that they update the zoning map.
I see that, and the map that shows immediately before the zoning map, which basically is the annexation map, does have a lot of the corrections. So it's not as if something hasn't been done. The question is why haven't they been integrated? And the only thing I would say, Glenn, is that in 2018, prior to the start of the Planning Commission's work on the CDP, I went to Max and discussed with him whether the zoning map had been adapted to the GIS system. Okay, and I told him why, the need for that, and it had not been. Okay, and he told me that he, in fact, was overly busy. They were working on updating the GIS system, et cetera. So I then went to the city manager, and I advised the city manager, this is early in 2018, before the Planning Commission even started their process, that there were errors in the zoning map, and they needed to be corrected. Not so much relative to zoning, but relative to the layout of lots,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. There may be zoning problems also, but the most notable things were the layout of lots. So, and she said at that time, because we needed Max to do something, so I was really asking for help to get her to authorize Max to do something about it. So here it is 4 years later, and we haven't done it. And I'm sort of wondering why, because there certainly has been plenty of time.
There's been a lot of time. I will say that the commissioners have not been without work to do. There's
But
plenty
the
of work that
commissioners
they,
don't do this.
yeah,
The commissioners don't do the map.
I understand, but they have to actually formally adopt it. So I understand and agree with you, and everybody up here agrees that the map needs to be updated. So that's an action item. They've all acknowledged it. It's in the CDP, so it's going to get done. It's past due for sure.
Okay. Because it's one of the things that the state really does want from the CDP.
Right.
Thank you, David. Any other members of the public would like to speak? No? No? If nobody else from the public would like to speak, then we're going to close the public hearing portion of the CDP special meeting and turn it over to the commissioners. I would like to start off quickly with a thank you to the Planning Commission members, multiple Planning Commission members and multiple compositions of Planning Commissions. Thank you to the members of the public that came and gave input and feedback, as well as filled out the surveys that gave us a lot of information. Thank you to the staff, Debbie Fowle, our first consultant, Lauren Good with Wallace and Montgomery, our second, that stepped in here and kind of saved the day. And thank you to the Board of Commissioners and many, many others. I think do a better job of thank yous within the CDP itself, listing all the different groups that contributed that. So with that, we'll turn it over to the commissioners. Do you have any further comments or before somebody wants to offer a motion?
May I just offer, Mayor,
Yes.
that, so I'd make a couple edits to the ordinance so at line number 81, or starting at line 80.
Yes.
Whereas as a result of the public meetings, the mayor and commissioners made further edits to the comprehensive plan draft number 7, comma, then I'd add resulting in a final draft number 10.
Right, resulting in final draft number 10.
And then
Okay,
at line 92, whereas the final draft version 10, insert version 10 of the 2020 comprehensive plan at line
92, final draft
version
version.
10 of the,
Okay,
and then at line 95, whereas the mayor and commissioners find that the final draft insert version 10 of the 2020 comprehensive development plan. So 3 locations, I'd insert that version 10.
all right, sounds good.
Thanks.
Any further comments from the commissioners before we accept a motion?
Just a question or comment with regards, I think this ordinance that is prepared certainly provides a lot of context and a timeline for the history of this CDP. And typically, is this included as part of a CDP, or how is this, as we've all been looking for history of things that happened in the city, I think this is an extremely important part of the history of the preparation of the CDP. And how is this to be included or a reference point to the CDP?
Are you questioning that this is the first year, I think, ever that we're doing it by ordinance?
No, I just think
Or questioning, should it be incorporated into the?
my desire would be that this would be incorporated as part of the CDP, because I think it gives, as I said, a lot of context and timeline of the development of this. And when someone goes back in 10 years to revise it, I don't know if any of us will be around to give some history as to what actually took place and what happened and why it was 2022 as opposed to 2020, this type of thing. So I'm just curious that, again, I think this incorporates a lot of detailed information that provides context to the CDP, especially the timeline, and it should be an integral part of the CDP.
That's a good point. Can we add to the bottom of this and that it be incorporated into the CP as part of the appendix?
So two things. One, it'll be incorporated and we'll put it in her ordinance book as an ordinance adopted by the commissioners. It will also be sent to the state along with your cover letter saying, "Dear Governor, please certify." But Lauren, can we include it as part of the?
We currently have a placeholder in Appendix E, which that appendix is called Adoption Documents. We have a place there for the Planning Commission's recommendation, your adoption ordinance, the Office of State Planning final recommendation letter, and then the governor's certification letter. So that appendix currently is noted that it will be completed for the final publication. So we have intended to incorporate this from the outset.
Is that all right?
That's fine.
Sounds
Thank you
good.
very much.
Good point. Thank you very much. Any other broad comments?
I had a question on timing. I was just wondering, we had some discussion regarding whether we would revisit this in 2025 or we're going to start the clock at 2022. Is there does that need to be put into some sort of language, or is that just something we will handle later on?
Is that, Glenn, the purview of the Planning Commission? This is in their lap.
So that's a good question. Since this is being designated as the 2020, are we obligated, are the commissioners and the Planning Commission obligated to begin in 2025? Or that's the intent, I think, is to begin in 2025. Yeah.
They are not obligated to. The 5 and 10 year benchmark times are based on the date of the governor's certification, which will ultimately be backdated till the date of the adoption of the adoption ordinance. So that would, the state would not be looking for those until 2027 and 2032. That being said, there has been a desire expressed to get back on a more
5-year.
5 and 10 year process. So that remains at the city's purview, but that being said, again, the state deadlines of 2027 and 32 are the ones that the city has to comply with.
Okay, Tim?
Yes, but are we going to, do we make a decision on that, or is that something we should discuss another time?
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to dovetail off of what Commissioner Bennett just brought up. It doesn't, in my head, have a significant impact on accepting the content of this CDP. I look very forward to the implementation strategy workshop that I am certain we'll have at some point, where I would think we would have some very serious conversations about all of the next steps. So I'm very much in favor of moving forward and getting this agreed to.
Anybody else with broad comments? If not, I would entertain a motion. And remember, this is a requirement that we have to adopt the CDP by ordinance, correct?
That's correct.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for the adoption of the 2020 Comprehensive Plan, the ordinance of the Mayor and Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach, adopting the 2020 Comprehensive Plan update and requesting that the Governor of Delaware certify the plan.
Second.
With the 3 edits.
With the
that
3 edits as
Thanks.
stated on lines 81, 92, and 95.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Patrick Gossett and a second by Commissioner Susan Gay to adopt the ordinance before us, which adopts the 2020 Comprehensive Development Plan and requests that the Governor of Delaware certify the plan with 3 edits to it. On line 81, adding after the semicolon, resulting in final draft number 10. Second edit on line 92, beginning, whereas the final draft, insert version 10, 2020 Comprehensive Development Plan, and line 95 that begins, whereas the mayor and city commissioners find that the final draft, insert version number 10, 2020 Comprehensive Development Plan. Is there any further discussion by the commissioners? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Tony Sharp?
Aye.
Do we need to give reasons?
No.
All right. Commissioner Jay Legree,
Aye.
Commissioner Ed Chernowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Susan Gay,
Aye.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett,
Aye.
Commissioner Tim Bennett,
Aye.
and the mayor votes aye. The ordinance is adopted unanimously with the 3 edits. Thank you very much. This is a good pat on the back again to all those that contributed. This is actually very exciting. There's the CDP not only meets the minimum requirements for the CDP, but it exceeds it greatly. It's a good resource. With that, I'm going to put this stuff aside. We'll move. Where's the agenda? We'll move to the second item of business today on the special meeting agenda, which is to discuss status of discuss status of construction permits and work authorizations for the reconstruction of the former Sandcastle Hotel. This is designed to specifically address what's going on as far as construction and the process to get there so far this year. I'd like to make a brief introduction. During our last public meeting of Friday, June 17th, questions were raised about the work authorizations for the reconstruction of the hotel formerly known as the Sandcastle. Some of the responses raised eyebrows, including mine, and subsequently, an article in the Cape Gazette labeled the contractors getting special favor that did not sit well with me or others. I decided to address this head on and so amended today's meeting agenda to include the opportunity to receive more background and learn more about the specifics of the work authorization for the former Sandcastle. I will say that after my investigation, I believe that today's discussion will be enlightening and point out code deficiencies, which I believe need to be addressed. Well, a conversation should identify perceived mistakes in the process authorizing work, suggest that more discussion is needed to address commercial construction in general, but also specifically commercial construction during the summer months. I'd like to make note early and emphasize that the contractor has done nothing wrong. Everything they have done and are doing is by the book. In fact, I want to compliment the contractor for maintaining communication so well and for maintaining the site in clean condition and keeping the safety of workers on the construction site and safety of passersby as a priority. Today we'll cover the following issues: permitting, building permits, demolition permits, public space use permits, or lack thereof for permits. We'll talk about summer work restrictions, which address date restrictions, working hours, storage limitations, and restrictions on dates for conducting demolitions. We will also review the authority of and limitations of the city manager in building and licensing, as well as the mayor when it comes to construction projects. During our discussion, I believe certain issues may arise that I will defer to a future meeting so the topics can be further and properly noticed in an agenda to give people more notice and the ability to come here and participate if they like. Such topics such as the broader topic of commercial construction, how to minimize disruption to the community and neighbors, modifying, should we modify or consider modify summer restrictions, such as times when dumpsters are allowed on the street and not allowed on the streets, etc. I think for ease of conversation today, the easiest thing is just to refer to this construction site as the Sandcastle Motel. And with that, I'd like to review some codes real quick before we get into the meat of this conversation. We have a code shown up on the screen. Thank you, Lauren. Shown up on the screen, it has to do with storage of construction materials. No applications for building permits for construction between May 15th and September 15th of any year shall be granted by the building official unless the storage of all materials for such construction shall be maintained on the site of construction in such a manner as to not interfere with pedestrian or vehicular traffic, and adequate barriers and lighting are maintained. we'll be talking about that in reference specific to the Sandcastle later on. Hours of construction. No construction shall be carried on between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 a.m., which, in other words of saying it, construction hours are from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then overnight, no construction is allowed. No construction shall place on any Saturday, Sunday, or following state holidays, New Year's Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving Day, and Christmas, provided, however, that construction shall be permitted on Saturdays, except where Saturday falls on a holiday between the hours of 9 and 5, in the time window noted November 1 to April 30th. Note that we need to amend that code to add June 13th, because that's a new federal holiday. So we've got some homework to do there. The other code I wanted to reference real quick is demolitions. And I wanted to start off real quick with what I believe. I took the full code and tried to condense it to what I think the original code was in 1990. And that would be what's in front of us there. In 1990, I believe the code was simply consisting of 105.1 or 105-1, demolition prohibited during certain periods. And this is one of the heights of our conversation today. During the period commencing May 15th through September 15th of each and every year, the demolition of any building or structure which has a square footage of 750 square feet or more and has a connection to the city water or sewer line shall be prohibited. So then in 2006, adding to 105-1, I was a citizen in that point. Commissioner Gossett, I think you were a commissioner at this point. I know Henry DeWitt was, because I think he kind of led the charge on this. But 105.2 basically has to do with giving notice to the neighbors in the community that construction's going to or demolition's going to have, that it may very well happen in close proximity to your house. Be prepared, cover things up so they don't get dusty, remove anything you think that might get broken if any debris went over onto your property. So I'm not going to read it all through, but it has to do with certain notices and posting a notice and delaying demolition by 30 days to be able to give proper notice to everybody. There's another emergency situation that I'll come back to that was added in 2006 that I'll come back to in a little bit on a separate topic. Let's see here. The other thing I wanted to show you real quick is these are the actual permits that are written on and handed out. They're not the permit application. Those are a little different. But I just wanted to reiterate, and I think some of the content on here is a reiteration of the law as a reminder, to serve as a reminder for the contractor. And I wanted to review the front and the back of the form real quick. Again, hours of construction are there. Down toward the bottom, it mentions the work has to be performed under a building permit. Construction hours are reiterated again, and what the holidays are and what you can again. So this is another thing after we amend the code, we need to make reference to that. In the meantime, perhaps building and licensing just hand writes that in there perhaps. And then we've got the holidays listed. What I wanted to do is I could not find the code, but we also, from May 15th to September 15th of each year, do not allow, I missed storage material. I'll go back to that. We do not allow dumpsters and porta potties on the street. So this reiterates that. And I missed earlier code. I want to go right here under storage of construction materials between May 15th and September 15th of any year. All storage of materials for construction shall be maintained on site of construction in such a manner as to not interfere with pedestrian or vehicular traffic, and adequate barriers and lighting are maintained. And then again reiterates the hours of construction. The demolition permit, this is what would be filled out and given to the contractor after they submit an application and it's validated. And again, on the back, it has the same type of information. And I just threw in here the house moving permit for the heck of it, because I just wanted to state, reiterate that house moving is also restricted in the summertime. It's, I think, because it's considered demolition. You're removing something off a site in entirety and you're sending it down the road. So that has restrictions as well. So with that, what I'd like to do is get into a conversation or explanation, if you will. I don't know whether the best thing is to hold off questions until that we're done, or ask your questions, and if we find that they're appropriate at that moment, we'll certainly address them. And we figure out that your question is best answered a little bit later, that we'll defer it a little bit. But let's start off with the permitting process. We've got building permits, demolition permits, public use, space use permits. Let's just start off with the building permit and demolition permit. I want to turn it over to Evan. I'd like to identify all the permits Sandcastle applied for, and identify all the permits they were required to apply from. Did you have a question
I
first?
do, Mayor. Before we get into the weeds, which I'm hoping we're not going to get way into the weeds, because that's not how this issue was brought to me. The issue was brought very broadly of what is demolition going on Rehoboth Avenue when the perception is that it is restricted. So I just have a question that I don't know if you can answer right now or if you think it's not appropriate. Will we be able to have a straightforward answer of, it seems like you've already stated the contractor is okay. So will we be able to assess a straightforward answer of whether or not we have made mistakes in the city or we need improvements in the city?
Well, that's the intent. That's why I've labored over an outline for this. And so it's likely going to be longer than you hope for. But the intent is to be very transparent and address everything from the building permits that were received and building or demolition permits that are perceived not to have been issued, as well as I do want to go over what all these other codes are and what the authority of the city manager and all this. I want to get it all out in the open. And so that's the intent, to be very deliberate in this. So we're going to answer all your questions that you intimated right now.
Thank you.
So I want to turn it over to Evan to just talk about building permits, demolition permits for specific to the Sandcastle.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, commissioners, members of the public. The initial work started back actually in January of 2022. There was a building permit that was issued on January 10th, which included the renovations to the existing hotel, which included the parking, rooms, the pool, general flow throughout the building. And it's important to note that there was no addition to the building occupancy as part of that building permit that was issued in January. Prior to the issuance of that building permit, we did have the applicant fill out a public space permit, which we have instituted probably within the last year here in the city of Rehoboth Beach, which basically is a form that is required to be filled out if anybody's requesting the closure or blockage of a street, lane, parking spot, sidewalk, boardwalk, or any other city-owned right-of-way. So on January 4th, this application was received. So the public space permit was received and approved January 4th. The building permit was issued January 10th, 2022. Fast forward to June, most recently, an on-site meeting was held at the request of the contractor on June 13th, 2022, between the Building and Licensing Department and the contractor. And this meeting was concerning observed failing and deteriorating southwest walls during the initial renovations of the project. So initially what was observed was that there are, and Matt can explain it much better than I could, but there are metal beams as well as metal fasteners that hold the facade of those walls onto the building. And it was observed that they were actually failing, they were rusting. In some areas, the fasteners were as thin as coat hangers. So it was determined that those walls needed to come down. Yes.
Who was at that meeting?
I believe it was Matt and the contractor, Brendan,
And that was
June
who
13th.
was there? Matt and the contractor.
Yes.
Who was
Brendan.
the project manager or the applicant?
Yeah, it was the project manager, Brendan. I can get you a last name, but I'm not positive of it off the
And
top of
he
my
is
head.
with North Star Construction?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we let Evan continue?
Sure.
Yes, go ahead, Evan.
So again, the observation showed that the metal fasteners and beams holding the wall up were severely rusted and deteriorating. This then led to a request to change the scope of work from the initial building permit, and thus a second building permit was completed and filled out by the contractor. That second building permit was issued on June 15th, 2022. The work included the replacement of the rotting, deteriorating walls found during the initial renovation. And again, the construction was not to increase any habitable areas or square footage currently existing. So important to note here, a demolition permit was not issued because we were not, in this case, the contractor was not removing the entire Sandcastle Motel, the entire building or structure. It was a simple remove and replace. We can talk a little bit more about that later. So prior to the start of the work being done and prior to the issuance of the building permit on June 15th, city staff met with the contractor to coordinate the removal of those existing walls. So it was identified that a safety zone needed to be established, very similar to what was previously authorized back on June 4th, again, including fencing and just a general safety zone to provide for materials as well as construction equipment and the safety of pedestrians and vehicles nearby. So the agreement was to cone off the area between the Sandcastle and the fire company, which is fire company property, to safely allow for the removal of the walls and the storage of the dumpster there. And this was, again, done on fire company property. It was consulted with the fire company. We also allowed the contractor to extend the existing fence on Rehoboth Avenue out slightly to accommodate, again, a safety zone as long as a minimum of 7-foot pedestrian pathway was maintained for pedestrians. We then had them pull the fence back to the original location at the end of the day and on Fridays in preparation for the weekend. And again, the fencing was needed regardless of any removal of the walls, again, just for the safety of pedestrian safety zone for the construction that was taking place. The work was allowed to be done Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. from June 20th to June 23rd, and from June 27th to June 30th, in an effort to have the work completed by the 4th of July and have no work done on Fridays. We also had the contractor agree that no work would be done from July 1st through the 5th to accommodate the 4th of July weekend. Again, the contractor is paying for parking spaces in the convention center that's being used by the fire company. And the schedule now is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. beginning Wednesday of this week, and the fire company alley will no longer be used. The floor is the only remaining piece of the structure that's being removed. As of yesterday, it was about 45% completed, and it's expected to be finished today. All work is expected to be completed tomorrow, and the equipment will be removed from the site tomorrow as well. And that's all I have, Mayor. We can certainly.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to delve deeper into some of these topics there. Again, we're going to start again with building permits and demolition permits, and then we're going to go to the public space and the use of the fencing, dumpsters, no storage materials on city property, and construction dates and times, just because I want clarity for all of us as well as member of the public on this. Again, 2 building permits were issued, building permit number 1, then permit number 2. I have to admit that when I look over there for building permit number 1, it kind of looks like demolition. And for the building permit number 2, the most recent work we saw absolutely, definitely, positively looks like demolition. It looks like demolition, it smells like demolition, it's dusty like demolition, it sounds like demolition. So I'd like you to go back, or maybe Matt, help explain in more detail why we didn't require a demolition permit for permit number 1 and then permit number 2, so that we all have some clarity there.
I'd like to go back a little bit further. When did we know that it was $5.5 million, or when did we know the amount of the money that was going to be spent on this project?
I don't know how that's relevant right now, Jay.
Huh?
I don't know how that's relevant right now.
Oh, it's very relevant. It's very, very relevant.
Well, can you
Once
maybe?
we discovered that it's a $5.5 million project, it should take on an entirely new perspective in our minds. It's a big project, and I can tell you why if you want to keep going.
Well, I'd prefer you write that down and bring it up at the end if you need to, but I'd like to go through this process and articulate the answers to these topics.
Well, then when we're done, I'll start over and we'll go through it again.
That's fine.
think we really made some bad mistakes.
Just be able to clarify what your intent is there. So if you would address, the elephant in the room is why demolition permits were not required for building number 1 and building number 2, because those seem to be the great focus, especially with the perception of violating our summer work rules.
Thank you, Mayor. Historically, and I have gone back to check other properties that are very similar to this, historically, a demolition permit is only issued in the city of Rehoboth to remove an entire structure and clear the lot completely for the new construction proposed.
Okay, and my response is, I understand that. And you heard me earlier say, it looks like it, smells like it, I don't like that. So I understand your answer, and I'm agreeable to it based on past practices and permits that I've looked up, have followed that rule. And what I would say, though, is that this future meeting I'm talking about, we need to address that, because we absolutely need a definition. I understand, Matt, there's no definition of demolition in the code.
That's not true.
There's no definition of demolition in the international code. And if you want, you can address
Yeah,
that.
you know, I will, yeah.
But you want to look it up and
Well,
insert
yeah,
that now while we're on
you
it?
finish and then I got a couple things.
Well, I just stated my understanding that there's, and I couldn't find anything in the code defining demolition, nor is it in the ICC or international code. And in the absence of that, I think it's legitimate that we go by past practice. And past practice has shown that, by example, for the school property, got a demolition permit as well as a building permit to tear down. The demolition permit was to tear down 3 buildings, 2 school buildings and a garden house or something. Interestingly, there's not always consistency, because Hotel Rehoboth tore down a building in entirety and never got a demolition permit. So there's inconsistency there. But for what I looked up, dominantly, Green Turtle took over Sunview Hotel. Sunview Hotel, by my visuals, gutted the interior 100% of the Sunview Hotel to create the Green Turtle, and no demolition permit was received for that. Again, so that seems to follow past practice that, except for the Hotel Rehoboth, demolition permits are only issued for complete demolition of a building, and that applies residential as well as commercial. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
So did you find something?
Yeah, I have several things.
Yeah, but
Can I start?
right now, we're just on demolition.
Oh, no, that's what I have. Here's all about demolitions. First of all, what you've just described as past practices, it really underscores the importance and the power of precedent. And that's obviously what led to where we are today, but it's also the danger of continuing without addressing it. So I'm very glad that you're addressing it. In your opening comments, you mentioned that the contractors had done everything by the book. And while I absolutely believe that the contractors are not to blame here, and this is not on them at all, I have to take issue with it being by the book if the book is the code. Because there are clear indications in here. First of all, it says the demolition of any building or structure which has a square footage of 750 square feet or more. And, you know, the 750 square feet I take to be gross floor area of the part being demolished and then the code also has a definition of structure, anything constructed or erected, including any part thereof. Okay? So I think that, I don't know why partials have not been permitted before, but I'm actually rather alarmed by that. But let me go to where I found, interestingly, the definition of demolition is in the tree code. So obviously it's not in the zoning code, but it does exist. And, hold on a minute. I'll get it. I had three things to look at here because I was looking at the definition of demolition, but hold on a minute. Article 2, definitions. Okay. Demolition includes the destruction of all or part of a structure or the removal of all or part of any structure to any off-site location.
Commissioner Gay, can you just reference?
Yes, that is
where
in 253-24. Again, it is in the tree code, is the only place in the code where it's actually defined as a term. The reason I started with the information about demolitions is because that also seems to say demolition of whole or any part of a structure. So to me, it's covered both ways. I don't know what we're missing here.
Well, I'm comfortable continuing, and we don't have to like the answers. But these are the answers that we're going to get, and I think they're valid. However, as I said earlier, I think making a little list here of things that we need to address into the future. So, by example, is mentioning demolition in another chapter without reference in the building code somewhere valid? And does indeed that supersede their philosophy? But we need to get this clear, and I think now's a good time to do it. I just wish it hadn't come about like this, but why it's so important to me, and I think to us, is because I'm looking forward to the next, or not necessarily looking forward, I'm looking into the future in the next 5 years perhaps, that every year we could have a commercial construction project going on that's even bigger and eclipses the size of this, and I think we need to have all those answers. So I'm looking at taking all the input from everybody, but not necessarily addressing it and coming to a conclusion at this meeting, but putting it on a future agenda. So, but again, I want everybody at the end of today to be able to understand what the reasoning is to get to this point.
Mayor, I have a question about these failing walls.
About the what?
Failing walls for, I guess, Mr. Janis. Not being an expert in construction, I'm kind of curious. The term was used that observed failing walls. Was that something that was unable to be observed earlier on? And why was that, is what I'm trying to ask.
Thank you, Commissioner. It was something that was unobservable during the removal process of the different finishes that existed in the prior construction. When the contractor began to remove those finishes, he saw into the wall and saw the rotting steel studs and discovered that more work was needed to remedy the situation.
So it was all internal?
It was all internal,
Okay,
yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Let me make a note real quick. The 1 Virginia Avenue is a concrete building. Most people think concrete lasts forever. And surprisingly, it absolutely doesn't. It absorbs moisture like a sponge, and the internal reinforcements that help it hold up are deteriorate. By example, 1 Virginia, they removed the exterior wall finish, which is concrete, to the point where you could physically stand down on the boardwalk and look into everybody's apartment. That they denuded the skin in entirety, and only a building permit was issued, no demolition permit. Same thing happened for Edgewater House because it's made of concrete. Same thing happened with Henlopen Concrete, Henlopen Condos because it's made of concrete. Same thing happened for Star of the Sea because it's made of concrete. So it's kind of interesting that concrete is not a forever product. The structural steel inside, you can't tell until something deteriorates or erodes to the point where it sloughs off, and then you can see the interior. So I just thought that was an interesting topic. Susan, did you have something else in terms of demolition?
No, although I will say that I think that the code has the problem with not issuing a permit or in the first place is that the code does have a nice process that follows when there is an application, a public notice, a notice to nearby property owners. There are fees associated with it. The contractor has to be licensed. Am I correct that the demolition contractor is not licensed in the city?
All contractors who do any work in the city are licensed.
Then was he just licensed recently? Because it's not on the site as a holding a business license.
I would have to look into it to give you a correct answer on that, but every contractor who does work in the city needs to be licensed and insured.
Yeah, because the reason I bring that up is since it was all under North Star, I thought maybe, and since there was no demolition permit, I didn't know if that had been followed through as well. All I'm saying is that in the demolition, in the code, there is a process there that even allows for an emergency removal, but there's still a process, and there's still a notification, and there's still steps and fees associated with it. So I think that's one of the other dangers in the precedence that's been set in the past.
But again, in this situation, since they didn't see it as demolition of the entirety, then it was not overlooked. It was just not viewed as a necessary step. So again, we need to address that.
Could I ask the building official, in your experienced opinion, because you deal with this much more than any of us up here, the question of a partial demolition or as past practices and taking down the whole building is issued a demolition permit. Can you give me some perspective on the fact of a partial demolition if we talk about how to interpret that in the code in the future or something of that nature? Is it a percentage? Is it just how does one observe that or express that to the applicant as to what is really needed?
Thank you, Commissioner. So there are, as we know, there's a 50% rule. If you remove 50% of the structure, the entire property needs to come into compliance with the zoning code. What gets interesting is that with every remodeling building permit that's issued, there is some inherent demolition needed for that permit. Let's take a roof, for instance. If we're tearing off a roof and we're replacing it with a new roof, there's demolition there. But would we make them pull a demolition permit for that? Currently in our code, no, we would not. That's part of the construction process. So you would need to set a limit in the code to say, if we're doing this activity, that constitutes demolition. If we're doing this activity, that constitutes construction. There's no, unfortunately, demolition is a great gray area. As I stated, with every remodel project, there is some inherent demolition that needs to occur.
Would you, what would be your opinion of having I don't say a different set of standards, but we do have different standards for residential construction and commercial construction with regards to a roof on an individual home being removed. That would affect at most maybe 5 neighboring properties, 2 on either side and 3 in the back. As to whether a roof removal of a commercial building certainly has the impact of neighborings, but also a public sidewalk with much more volume of pedestrians and what have you. So again, in looking forward to the future of code revision, would that be an approach that would be able to take, commercial versus residential?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. It's certainly something to think about, but in emergency situations, that's something we would also have to consider. For instance, a hotel that loses its complete HVAC system during the middle of summer. Do we force them to wait till the end of summer to replace all their HVAC systems? A roof is blown off during a hurricane. Do we force that commercial application to wait until September to replace that roof? Granted, I'm giving some extreme circumstances, but they kind of correlate directly to
But I
which
think
way we would go on that.
As past practices, is my understanding and personal experience is that if you have an HVAC fail, that the permitting process is expedited, so that you're not without heat or without HVAC. So I think those are emergency situations that do take place and on a much lesser scale than a demolition. So again, looking to the future, that's how I'm approaching this. But I'm just curious, when the person discovered the structural and concrete issues, why wasn't a demolition permit issued at that time?
Again, demolition permits in the city of Rehoboth are only offered to remove the entire structure, not
So that's-
portions of the
Even
structure.
though our code states differently, but that has been past practice.
That has been the past practice, yes, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Again, some of this is getting into that future meeting topic, and I'll violate my own rule by saying, at that time into the future, I will bring up some other permits that, here's a definition from another town. You need a complete demolition permit to demolish an entire building or structure. If you remove more than 2/3 of an existing framing and alter any outside wall, it is considered complete demolition. So I think that's ripe for future discussion, that we define it more precisely.
but I think that-
Also, from another state seminar, I caught something that there's no specific threshold or square footage in this particular jurisdiction that triggers a demo permit. A certain amount of demolition is part and parcel of any given building permit. That said, the question is, can a minor or small amount of demolition be included in the building permit? So again, I think there are substantial issues being raised here, but my hope is more to continue to focus on this situation so we can have a better understanding.
Well, I agree.
Go ahead.
But I just feel that, we have a collection of interested parties and a issue that is before us, and to collect that data as we are here to capture it, I think is most important. And just a comment, and, it's the way the code reads, but the issue of 50% demolition or having more residential, we all know very, very well that, somebody will destroy 49% of the house, fix that, and then come back and just destroy the other 49% of the house. So there are loopholes in this that have been around for decades. So I think, and again, addressing this in the future, those past practices have to be addressed for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me add something to that, too. I mean, I think the roof example is a great one, because I know that people do.
The what
replace-
example?
The roof example that Matt gave as an example of something that has to be demolished, and are you not going to allow that during the summer? But, and maybe this is because I think the code already has a size limitation when it talks about 750 square feet. And again, in my mind, if you're demolishing the roof, but you're not demolishing the rooms beneath it, then, 750 square feet is gross floor area, not roof area. And, maybe that clarification has to be made, because then a roof replacement or an HVAC replacement wouldn't qualify, but something like this project, clearly would. And the other thing is that, the code already has a number of nuances. Like, for instance, If I wanted to replace the carpet in my house, I would not need a permit, but when I take the carpet out and put wood floors, I do. So there are a lot of little details like that already in the code, and if we need to add details to cover things like this, then, I guess maybe that's what we have to do.
Commissioner Bennett?
Had the walls not been observed to be failing, would they have followed the May 15th, September 15th rules?
I don't understand.
Again, this isn't a demolition permit. It is a building permit, so they would not have had to
They
have
wouldn't have
followed
fallen
those
under that.
rules.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, and for me, this is where we've gone off the rails, in my opinion. And an individual who called me, I think, stopped me short, honestly, in the way they came at this. They came at it not from code, not from all of the things we're talking about here. They came at it from the optics of it. The optics, as it was put to me, this is happening under the nose of City Hall. Right. I mean, you can throw a football from here to there. And their only concern was they made the assumption it was being done because of some kind of emergency or whatever. And their point was nothing more than, could this not have been all averted? Let's just go into the assumption that it was all absolutely correct. At the time decisions were made and explanations were heard and so forth, that it's the optics, that was there not a way to communicate that there is a situation that is going to happen on Rehoboth Avenue under everyone's eyes, driving up and down that street every single day and seeing something that they in turn say, well, I'm not allowed to do that. Why don't the rules apply to everyone equally? So to me, it's not at all about the code. It's not at all about this section and that section and the definitions. It's about the optics. Not that we don't need to address all the good things that you're trying to surface here, but I think we can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is it all happened under the nose of City Hall. And it only begs the question, should we not be a bit more savvy in connecting the dots of how it's going to look to our community? That's all, that I think is valid for me.
No, I hear you, but when you say it happened under their nose, it almost makes like it's an allegation that they're doing something wrong. And again, I think it is all about the code, and that we need to address the code, because they have validated to me that they have applied past practice to this situation. And I've said at the outstart that I disagree with that, because I see it as demolition. But I'm very understanding of that. And again, that's why I keep emphasizing I want to address this in the future and in the near future before the next big commercial project starts, so that we have all these questions answered. And then as far as, the optics, yeah, we probably do better. But I don't want it to come out as building and licensing is doing something wrong, and now they're trying to rationalize it.
Well, and I want you to remember what I said. The individual who called me was very clear that they are saying there must have been something very compelling to have this happen in the middle of the season. They did not cast any aspersions against the city. They were just talking about, this doesn't really look good. And I had no response for that.
Right. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, I don't want to get into demolition in general. That will be a future agenda topic, but this specific situation, I think Commissioner Gossett just asked you, why was a building permit or a demolition permit not issued when the failing wall was identified? And I just want to clarify, it's not that it was ignored, the issue was found, they reached out to you, you met with them, they submitted another building permit application, and permit number 2 was issued, correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And I just want to address something. Commissioner Gay, you mentioned something about, maybe the contractor isn't doing everything properly because they're not doing it by the book. Understand, at least my position is that they don't deserve any fault.
Oh, I said that.
That
Yeah, I agree.
That, they did it they did it with our permission.
Right, oh, I said
So
that, yes.
So if you don't mind, if you have any questions further on demolition, certainly bring them up. But otherwise, let's move on to the public space use permit. Specifically, I want to address that fencing is out in the street. And then separately, I want to talk about that no dumpsters are allowed on the streets, and yet we have them. Then I would like to move on to the storage of construction materials is not allowed off-site, and I would like to do that as topic 3. And then the next topic is the date and time limits, that topic number 4, and then we'll get to the authority of the city manager to be able to address some of these issues. So, Evan, if you want to give a little talk on the public use space permit, I think my intent here is to focus on safety fencing, and what does that do to the project?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So certainly, some of the challenges with construction or permitting construction work to occur during the summer is that there are circumstances in which we do get requests from contractors to consume portions of public space, whether it's temporarily or for an extended basis. And so I don't recall when we initially implemented the public space permit, but again, we get these requests often. And so we thought it was appropriate, Public Works Director, I give credit to him for implementing this permit application, to, again, have documentation on any requests for closure or blockage of streets, lanes, parking spaces, sidewalks, boardwalk, or any other city right-of-way. So we, again, received the public space application back on January 4th, 2022, and we reviewed, obviously, the impact that it would have on the surrounding area. Typically, the process that we follow with these public space permits is it's taken in by Building and Licensing Department, it's reviewed by the Public Works Department, and then also distributed to other departments that it may impact. So whether it's going to impact the Parking Department, Police Department, Streets Department, Building and Licensing, so everybody takes a look at the application. So again, we had the applicant or the contractor fill out this public space permit at the time. Again, it was January, it was off-season. They requested to use public space more so as, again, a safety area, a safety zone. During the renovation project. You'll recall, at least I recall, a while back, I think even before this work started, a portion of the roof had come off of the Sandcastle Hotel and was laying in the street, so we had to send the police department out there, streets department to clean it up. So again, we thought it was appropriate to have a dedicated safety zone for this work to occur. So once we reviewed the application, we then thought it was appropriate that if they were allowed to use the public space for a safety zone, that they could store construction materials and a dumpster there. Certainly it was looked at as to whether the dumpster could be located on the opposite side of the building, but due to just the building in general, the materials being removed as part of the renovations couldn't be transferred through the building to the opposite side and put in a dumpster. What they would have had to do was come out onto public space around the sidewalk and dispose of it in the dumpster in the opposite side of the building. So again, because we provided them with a safety zone, we allowed them to have construction materials there and the dumpster. Certainly the challenge with construction work in the commercial district is some of these buildings are at 100% lot coverage, especially with renovation projects where they're not doing an entire demolition. This leads to challenges with storage of materials, storage of equipment, disposal of materials. So again, the application process was really a way for us to at least have a say-so in what the contractors are allowed to do so that we can review it from a public safety standpoint and ensure that they're complying with our requests. So that, again, that initial application was completed in January. It included the portion of 2nd Street and Rehoboth Avenue. And then as we approached the summer and the construction had to continue We allowed that work to continue into the summer season, again, maintaining the existing fence line that they had on Second Street and along the sidewalk on Rehoboth Avenue, just ensuring that on the sidewalk on Rehoboth Avenue, they maintained a minimum pedestrian access route. We did ask that they return some of the parking spaces, notably for the post office during the summer, but that a portion of the spaces could be consumed so long as they do pay for those parking spaces during the summer. If there's anything else you'd like me to address, Mayor, please let me know.
Thank you. I'd like to summarize a little bit, because I think the public space and the placement of the safety segues into the dumpsters and the construction materials, right? So what I'm hearing is that it's very difficult on commercial properties with zero setbacks to be able to put a fence at the property line or at the front facade and be able to do any work there. It's impossible. So it seems reasonable that there's a public works process, so it's scrutinized by the city, and the city helps determine at what distance the fence needs to be put out from the property line or front facade to maintain safety. I think safety has got to be the number one issue for everything that we do, protect our pedestrians and visitors, et cetera. So it would make sense that if that fencing is set out in the street because they say it needs to be 16 feet or 18 feet from the building, then that buffer zone that's created, why can't that be utilized for dumpsters, storage of materials, et cetera? And that's what they ended up doing. So that's why they violate the rules, if you will, on a strict level, but not necessarily, because that's no man's land now dedicated to the project as a safety zone. So it makes sense that the city manager and they're able to issue authority to put dumpsters in that area, as well as storage materials. This is not setting precedent. City Hall, we had a similar situation, or more recently, the Atlantic Sands addition when it was built. It's commercial property. They had an addition put on the back of the building. It's a zero lot line. They couldn't put fence up at the property line because then they would not physically be able to work. The fencing was put out at the curb line. Pedestrian pathways around the area were in the street. Storage of materials was allowed within that buffer zone. So again, this is nothing new. Are there any questions on dumpsters, storage of materials, fencing?
Mayor, I have one question, just for clarity. The public space permit that was, I guess, developed a year or so ago, that was an administrative process implementation by city staff. It's not referenced in the code at all.
That's correct.
Correct. Okay.
Yep, correct.
All right, anything else? If not, we'll move on to my next topic, which is, I just thought it appropriate to review the authority of the city manager, building and licensing, and mayor to deviate from codes. Let me start off with maybe the easiest one, and that is demolitions. This is what I skipped over, and it'll come up on the screen in a minute. This is section 105-3, emergency situations. Demolition of a building or structure during the prohibited periods or during the 30-day waiting period is permitted in emergency situations only if the mayor and city manager find that a bona fide emergency exists. Again, that didn't apply here. So the mayor has limited authority, but he did not exercise it because he didn't believe it was appropriate. Having said that, the authority of the city manager, basically, city manager has to follow code. But I do believe that there's room for discretion by the city manager, and it's unwritten discretion to some extent. You know, he reacted to the need for a special dismantling time frame by changing the hours a little bit for a very limited time, and I think that's appropriate. However, I do believe at some point, and it's hard to write down, I think, black and white what these policies are. But I do believe that if the city manager has some questions on the possibility of deviating from code otherwise, that they have to come to the mayor as a starting point. And then the mayor would determine when the need to come before the Board of Commissioners. By example, new hotel construction in a resort down south of us. The council members voted to allow construction hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. After checking with some of the residents in that neighborhood who wanted to accelerate construction, and they preferred that, so they gave their input. But it was the council that made that final decision to change the work hours from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. to 7 to 7 a.m. So there are times definitely when city manager needs to bring things to the commissioners through the mayor. Is there room for discretion by building and licensing? I believe so also. But again, it's hard, I think, to make a definitive list. One thing that comes to mind is that an example might be concrete work. Contractor comes to you and say, listen, tomorrow I'm doing a concrete pour of the entire first floor level in one pour. And we're going to start at 8 a.m. So we're starting on time, but I can't guarantee you we're going to be finished by the legal time limit of 5. So I believe the building inspector has that discretion. I would assume he would go and confer with the city manager, but have discretion to say, you've got till 8 p.m. or in that situation, you've got until you're done. To be realistic, it's hard to put a time frame on that kind of thing. But again, even with saying that, I believe the discretions offered by building and licensing must come through authorization of the city manager. So I just wanted to hit on that real quick, that, as I said. So with that, I think we've identified a lot of things that need to go on that future agenda. I think as we do minutes, and maybe you and Linda can help us articulate what some of those future points are. Other commissioners, if you would like to, send them to me with some specificity in terms of code reference or what you think needs to be addressed. I'd rather do it sooner than later. I'd certainly like to do it before the next construction permit is filed for another project. So again, Evan, you've already given us what the remaining schedule is for the dismantling over here. And I've identified the need for future meetings. Is there any further comment up here before we go to members of the public? Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
When did you first discover that this project was $5 million or $5.5 million or a big project?
Upon submittal of the proposal from the contractor.
Which was on
January
4th or something like that?
Right, correct.
Was the city manager aware of the size of this project?
I don't believe so.
So you were the one who was aware of it,
Yes,
not anybody else. Did you think about taking this to a site plan review and sharing the responsibility of this huge project as the process allows? Did that enter your mind? Did you take it? Did you decide to talk to the mayor about it?
So I looked at the code and determined that none of those criteria met this project's needs, or this project did not fulfill any of those requirements for a site plan review.
Commissioner Gay, do you have that?
I was going to ask that next, yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
You can bring it up, but
That's all I wanted to do
it
is
was
bring it
not
up.
my intent.
Well, we could have prevented this entire thing.
Well,
This entire optics
we may
problem.
agree or
Let me
disagree.
talk. I haven't interviewed you. I haven't interrupted you. And let me finish what I'm going to say, and then I'll say, as I always do, thank you, Mayor. If you would have taken this to a site plan review, or if the mayor would have recommended that you take it to a site plan review, none of these problems would have we wouldn't have been facing them right now, probably. The optics problems would have probably not been here. And Commissioner Sharp wouldn't have had to ask those questions. It was just a real disappointment for me but you didn't talk to the mayor, so he was not able to recommend to you that we go to a site plan review. And I have a bunch of other problems that we discussed out in the weeds. But I think we should go ahead and listen to Commissioner Gay, and she might disagree that none of those boxes were checked. Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And my point is I'm willing to receive this information, but I'm really not ready to engage in a deep conversation with it because I want to put it on a future meeting agenda so that it's noticed to everybody, the Planning Commission and anybody else that's interested in it. But again, to me, this is not an inquisition where we're firing questions and trying to demand answers. That can come at a future meeting date.
I agree. I just wanted to tee something up for a future discussion, Mayor.
Staying out in the weeds just causes subterfuge with the public.
And can you put the one, I put just the wording for the site plan review because I have questions about that as well. And I put it onto a document, so she's going to get that up there and zero in on the first paragraph, especially if you can make that bigger. I don't know if you can. You can't? Okay.
Is that on your screen?
It's on the screen up there.
But it's not on your screen.
No.
Oh.
Evan, can you do that? Actually, while he's doing that, let me ask a question. This may be an unfair question for Matt because you may not have the information at your fingertips, but I am curious. What's the lot size? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, it's 100 by maybe 300, so.
Okay, so it's more than 20,000 square feet?
I believe so, yes,
Okay.
Commissioner.
And also the approximate square footage of the hotel?
I'd have to refer to plans. It doesn't, it's not on the top of my head right now.
But it's more than 15,000 anyway.
I would agree.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, then I have wondered about this since the winter, frankly, that the code clearly says that no building permit shall be issued for any project that has 4 or more dwelling units, which actually this has that too, because hotel rooms are dwelling units in our code, the development or redevelopment of a parcel of land in excess of 20,000 square feet. I only bolded the next one because that's what I was thinking about at the time I looked into this. But frankly, this project meets not only some of the criteria, it meets all of the criteria. And I am perplexed as to why it did not go through site plan review. I'm just stunned about that.
Well, again, make your points and then we'll note those for a
so I
future
wanna-
agenda.
Yeah, by all means, let's talk about that in another meeting. Because I don't get it. I don't get it.
I think a problem perhaps is that the decision wasn't carried past the building and past Matt. And the mayor might have known about it, the city manager might have known about it, but it just I'm disappointed that it didn't happen.
All right. Anything else from the commissioners?
I just, yeah, I'm kind of taken from this standpoint of a teaching moment, as they say around here, look at the windshield and not the rearview mirror. But I think that, personally, I have complete confidence in the building and licensing staff. I've worked with them for many years, most recently in the restaurant revisions, the swimming pools, the residential rental permits and licensing and that type of stuff. And I just have complete confidence in what they do and how they do it. Is to address this in the future, I think a thing we should look at here, or issues we should look at, are we adequately staffed in the building and licensing department for what is coming forward in the number of building permits and applications and everything that's coming across the transom at the moment? Another thing where we are always trying to improve, but do we have the appropriate software that's the most available software that our staff can use and is most efficient and both also from the staff, but from the applicant's standpoint. I think that that's something we need to address in future meetings, certainly. And I don't think that could wait to the budget process. I think that needs to be addressed immediately because, building and licensing and permitting process affects everyone in this community, whether they're applying for one or their next door neighbor, or they have to walk past a constricted sidewalk or push a wheelchair by a constricted sidewalk. It affects everyone. And one of the things I just want keep those in mind for our future meetings. And the optics, I think, are very important. But I also know that we have engaged eCode, which is who manages our code book, for a complete review of the code. And if Mr. Miller, I don't want to put you on the spot at all, but I know that eCode came back with over 250 observations, let's put it that way, about insufficiencies in our code. And I know that you and the staff have been working on them diligently to address them. And bringing them to the mayor and commissioners for review or suggested changes. But just off the top of your head, was demolition or this type of site code review or any of this permitting aspects reflected in any of those comments brought forward by eCode?
No, it wasn't. And I do want to say one thing about that. So I think initially when I last presented it to you all, we had a deadline of June to respond to those 226 questions. Since then, I've learned that the June deadline is really a soft deadline, and we can push that deadline out further if we wish. And I think it's in the best interest of the city, the commissioners, to look at more than just those 226 questions, but look at chapters in entirety and figure out what needs to be updated moving forward. I think it's appropriate that the city take the additional time, however long it might be, to review the code in its entirety again, and not just those 226 unique specific questions. Because in some cases, there weren't any questions raised or observations raised about entire chapters. And I think it's still prudent that we look at each chapter and review those in entirety. So the mayor and I have talked about future agendas, about putting that on there, and whether we start at chapter 1 and go through all chapters, or if there are particular chapters we want to start on first to review and discuss. I think that's appropriate.
And is it your thought that either 1 through whatever, or is there a priority that you and your staff can put together to present to the mayor and commissioners? Because you're the ones that work with us on a day-to-day basis as to what is more of a priority item than issuing dog walking permits or something of that nature.
Sure. Yeah, there's certainly chapters that, we've talked about recently. I mean, I think, tree code may be one that we're able to go through pretty quickly because we've already been discussing that. But certainly if there are other chapters that we'd like to look at, that have been topics of most recent meetings, we can start with those. Or if there's other chapters that are more time sensitive, if it's parking or whatever it might be, we could certainly bring those forward first.
Yeah, I would certainly appreciate that type of priority list presented by you from representation from the staff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other broad comments from the commissioners? If not, we'll go to members of the public. Would you like to say anything? Carol shaking her head no. Nobody else? Okay. Come on up. Just again, please identify yourself and what your relationship is to the city. David?
I'm still the same person I was before, David Mellon, 105 Rodney Street.
Good.
Just a general comment. I appreciate the discussion today because it, I think, opened up the nature of what was discovered in the building. And I would just point out to you, I'm sure you know, what has taken place in Florida is quite similar. And it is not just the concrete, but it is the salt air and those deteriorations. So I appreciate those discussions. I'm, on the other hand, must totally agree with Commissioner Legree and Commissioner Gay. This project should have gone to a site plan review. By the way, I just looked at the county map, and the county map is 105 by 200 feet. So that's 21,000 square feet. So it clearly is above the 20,000 foot trigger level. And even if in talking with the Planning Commission, a preliminary review with the Planning Commission if they decided that it did not justify it. That step in itself would open up the transparency. I think it is wrong for the building department to a priori decide that it doesn't meet the criteria of the site plan. Susan put that up. There's actually 21 points, I believe.
Right, yeah.
And every one of them deals in one way or another with the impact of a project on the surrounding area. Not necessarily the project itself. That's taken care of basically in the building codes, but it's the impact of a project, whether it be the visual impact or actual impact, the moving of entrances, differences in the street traffic, et cetera, access. Those things, it should have gone to a site plan review. And for the building inspector to just say, well, I looked at it and it didn't qualify, I think inherently that's wrong. This is a time when you ought to be cautious and let more eyes look at it and make that decision.
Thank you, David. We'll
Okay?
keep that in mind.
And I am concerned, right now, it would appear to me that the decision to have the destruction, if you like, or whatever took place, probably was legitimate. I do worry about what's going to happen next summer, okay? When the Papa John family says, oh, we want to build a hotel, okay? Or one of my neighbors says, I want to do this, and we're turned down because you can't do destruction during the summer. I'm very concerned about the legal implication of that, because I think you're going to find yourself in court for an arbitrary and capricious approach. I'm pretty satisfied that the decisions that were made based on discovering the defects were probably proper. But I think from an optical point of view, as Tony has pointed out, you really have to let people know, or else they're going to come to different conclusions.
Thank you, David.
This should have gone to a site plan.
Thank you. We'll note that when we bring it up in the future. The intent here was to try to be transparent and let everybody know how we got to this point, and I hope that we've achieved that. But I would like to leave you with a vision. Future construction at a hotel down at the end of Rehoboth Avenue on the right side, unnamed. At some point or another, let's say they get demolition done prior to summertime. That means they can still work on the summer and Saturday. Where would their safety fence go under the current situation? Their safety fence might go 15 feet out from the building property line on Rehoboth Avenue. It might go half the width of the boardwalk out on the boardwalk. It might go 15 or 20 feet out into the street on Wilmington Avenue. Picture that, and you'll see what I think our future discussion needs to address, whether it's moratoriums or changing hours or other restrictions or whatever. I think there's a lot on our plate going forward. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I would like to publicly compliment our building inspector for his professionalism and candor when you have a number of people asking questions and all the good faith you put into managing through this. And I think it was already stated, this is a great opportunity to not look in the rearview mirror, but to look through the windshield. I think Commissioner Gossett said that, and really shore up our procedures, practices, and things that we need to consider going forward. So I think today's been very, very productive, and thank you for what you do.
And I would like to compliment you, Matt, on your composure under pressure. You did great.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Wouldn't miss it.
Commissioner Gossett?
Just one further comment, and I know I've mentioned this before on other subjects, but I do believe it would be very beneficial for us, again, to want to reinstitute having the building official present their report in person at the regular meetings. if nothing else, that it reflects the commercial projects, the new commercial projects, so that, again, the optics can be helped us in farther in advance, that those projects are coming forward. I know we've discontinued that process, and it's in discussion of bringing it back. I mentioned at last meeting about having the police chief here, at least during the season, to report on happenings in the city. Again, I think from an optic standpoint, the building and licensing certainly should be represented in person, so that not to pepper you with questions, but just to inform us as to the developments in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And if there's no further comments, I want to thank everybody for being here, and the public for their comments, and Matt, Janice. And with that, we'll call this meeting adjourned at 10:44 a.m. Thank you very much.